I've been seeing these markers pop up left and right online, and I'll be honest, I was very enticed to try them, so that's exactly what we're going to do this week. So hi everyone, I'm Ward and welcome to my channel Wardrawsalot, and this week we're going to be reviewing the Deli Acrylic markers. As you can see right here, it is not written in English, it's written in Chinese, so I put it in an image translator online, and this is what it gave me. It says that the Deli markers are double-sided, have water-based ink, can be used on multiple surfaces, that they are safe and have no odor to them, and that they're high-quality nibs that are soft and maneuverable. Once we go ahead and turn around the case, we can see that they have these lovely swatches displayed, and along with text that I also can't read, so let's put it in the translator again and tell you what it gave me. It expands on a lot of the things that were noted earlier, like the fact that it is a double-headed marker and can be used for a various amount of things, that it's waterproof and also has good light resistance, so you don't have to worry about it fading over time. The nibs are made of nylon, the water-based ink is bright and is safe to use, and of course gives the warnings of children under 3 cannot use it, and that you should not consume the parts, which probably goes in hand with the don't give it to kids under 3 years old. Now for the markers and case itself, the case is like this plastic case that has clasps at the end that are able to close up and keep the markers secure. It also has a handle, which in my head means that it's good for on-the-go travel, which means you could take it anywhere, and because it's so light and thin, it wouldn't be a hassle for you to take anywhere you want and just draw with them. Once you open the case, you're greeted with like this wonderful rainbow of colors. It's just in such a beautiful order. It looks so tasty, right? Like it actually looks delicious to look at because everything is in order and it looks so like presentable. So I really like that they do that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the individual marker. It's a white barreled marker that has 2 stripes at the end that indicate what color you are using. It also has the nibs on both sides. One is like a bullet nib, the other is a brush nib. Says acrylic marker, twin marker on it, and also has the number which indicates what color it is for when you swatch it down. The caps also have these little stoppers on them so they don't roll off of your table and then you have to find them on the floor, which always happens to me. Taking a look at the nibs, as you can see, it's already activated, so you don't have to go ahead and do that. This side has the bullet nib. It looks pretty standard. I kind of thought it was nothing crazy. The brush nib, on the other hand, looked kind of different than what I usually see, and it's because I think that it's made out of that nylon material, so it's almost like kind of plasticky in comparison. So I thought that that was something interesting and different that I haven't seen before. One more thing, once you flip over the marker, it also has more Chinese text. It actually says when you're done, make sure you cap off the markers and store it horizontally. So I'm guessing that's how you can get the most longevity out of these markers, is by following that guideline. Now that we've taken a look at the markers, it's time to actually swatch them. Most importantly, whenever you're doing something like this, you have to see what your colors look like. Sometimes the printed colors on the back don't match exactly, or the stripes on the markers don't match exactly either. The best thing to do is to use them on paper that you always use or are comfortable with using, so you can see how they work and how they lay down. For reference, I do have the 48 pack of markers, which I got for $20 off of Amazon. Normally they are $26, but I had a $6 coupon, so I took advantage of the opportunity. So with tax, the markers came out to $23 for the 48 marker set, which means each marker is about 46 cents each. I got the biggest set of colors. I believe it's 48, 24, and 12. There might be another pack, but I'm not sure. So if you wanted to get these markers, of course I always suggest the biggest one that you can get because you get the most colors out of it. I will say this one thing though, sometimes on Amazon they're listed as currently unavailable. No clue why. I guess the company maybe is just kind of stocking up on them or something, but that's why when I finally saw them on sale, I took them because I know they're kind of gone every other week. Just wait it out though, it'll come back in stock usually. Now, upon first impression, the immediate thing I noticed was how bright these colors are and how nicely they laid down. I felt like the colors did have a nice range of light, medium, and dark, but I do feel like they could have used a little bit more skin tones and a little less green. For some reason, acrylic markers always have too many greens. Can we stop this? From swatching, I could definitely tell it's going to pill up the paper, but that's just the nature of the water-based marker. Now that we've swatched the colors, it's time to put them to the real test, and that is using them in an illustration, especially because that's what I'm mainly going to be using them for. The picture I drew today is after my doll. I put this shirt on him and he looked like so royal and vampiric that I was like, I really gotta draw this, so that's exactly what I ended up doing. Now, spoiler alert, this isn't the only drawing that I end up doing, as you can tell from the thumbnail that, you clicked from this video on. There are several reasons why I decided to do a second illustration, and I'll explain that in a bit. But first, let me talk about the good points and the maybe not so good points of these markers. So let's start off with the good points. The first thing off the bat is the price. For 48 markers, usually you pay about $26, which normally would mean that the markers cost 55 cents a marker, but because I got it on sale with the $6 coupon, I got it for 46 cents a marker. So honestly, both prices are pretty good in my opinion, so that means they're pretty accessible to a good amount of people. The color range is pretty good, and I honestly like the fact that it is a double-ended marker, because if one of the nibs begin to fray out, at least you have another nib to fall back on. So this way you don't have to rely on the one nib if it completely starts messing up and just completely starts degrading. Now you at least have another point to access the marker from. That being said, it does have the two nibs of a brush and a bullet nib, which means that you can get a variation amount of strokes with the brush nib, and you can cover large surface areas with the bullet nib without having to sacrifice the brush nib. The thing about the ink in these markers is that they're not 100% opaque. Now, depending on the person, this is either a good thing or a bad thing. Some people probably want markers that are super opaque and that you don't have to layer up a million times, and that it's just one swipe and go. And maybe some people don't want full opacity, so you could see something under it. But majority of the time, I do see that most people want very opaque acrylic markers. It's usually almost never that I see somebody who wants something a little less opaque from them, and I think that's because the markers are skinny and they don't come with a super amount of ink, so you don't want to waste the ink by having to layer up a bunch. But everyone is different, and let me tell you, I was converted after this, because I used to be somebody before this video who would be like, oh, I want 100% opaque acrylic markers. But after this and after what I discovered, I've completely shifted mindsets. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. For now, I think that's all on the good points. Let's talk about the maybe not so good points. Like I said earlier, depending on the person, you might find the fact that it is not very opaque a bad point. It's just all up to a person's preference when it comes to that. Although the color selection is, of 48, of that 48, only maybe like 4 or 5 are usable skin tones, and that kind of sucks in my opinion because I use a lot of skin tones in my artwork because I'm mostly coloring in people. So the fact that it didn't come with enough skin tones is kind of like, yeah, but I mean, like, I can make it work, so it's all dependent on the person. One thing that I did notice immediately was that the brush nib was not holding up against me. And I'm somebody with a heavy hand, so if you got a heavy hand, these brush nibs are gonna fight for their lives when you grip it onto them, okay? So that's the one thing you gotta keep in mind, is either try and get a lighter hand while you're using them to color, or, just keep an eye out for the nibs and see how they're working with you. Some of them held up really well and I didn't have an issue. Some of them, though, the very tip was already beginning to fray, which, kind of sucks because I just got these. They shouldn't be fraying so quickly, but I'm somebody who justifies something for the price, so if it's cheap, I'll take a few mishaps here and there. Now, other than those main points, I didn't really find an issue with these markers. Mine, for some reason, did have some stale ink, and I think it's because, so hear me out here, I think it's because I didn't store them horizontally, especially because I didn't know to do that, because I had just gotten these markers, and I hadn't used them, so, I had them sitting out for maybe, a week or so, just, upward in a straight position instead of horizontally. So maybe the ink got stale because I didn't store them properly. So I'm giving that the benefit of the doubt here. I'm gonna blame that on myself because I didn't do something properly to make sure the longevity of these markers are for, like the proper storage and use and all of that. So maybe if I lay these markers in the correct position and I just let them be, the ink will probably activate a little bit better or not kind of stick to one side of the nib. So again, I'm going to put myself on that part versus them. From the most part, from what I saw, a good amount of the markers worked pretty fine. It was just a few that were a little crusty. So again, I think that that's probably just a storage issue. So just keep that in mind to put them in the proper place and position to make sure that they do work, you know, as good as possible. Now, for reference, this piece took me about an hour and a half to complete. One thing that I noticed as I was, you know, using these markers is just how much they actually blend into each other. A lot of the time when I would try and go back in and layer on top of the black lines on the shirt, I noticed that for some reason it would just mix in with the black and create a new color entirely. And this immediately piqued my interest, right? Because usually that doesn't happen with these kinds of markers. It usually just layers on top and is opaque enough to kind of cover it up and you don't have to go back in. But immediately when that started happening, I at first was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go over it and blah, blah, blah. But then after a bit, I was like, wait a minute, I think we can do something with this. So although I liked my drawing and thought it was pretty alright, I definitely felt like I could do something more with it after thinking about what the markers could really do. So from taking the markers and looking at what options I really had here, I was like, hold on, let's rethink this entire thing. I went off camera and I sketched something up and I started coloring it in just to see what would come out of it. And that's when I came up with this right here. I noticed that it started layering up really well. And once I started to notice that actually happen, that's when I started to create this little monologue that I'm going to show you right here. Okay, so what I've discovered using these Deli markers, okay, is that because they are less opaque than, like, for example, the Artex markers, you can get a transition blend between the two colors. I didn't have to add in a third color to create this. What I did was just layer the purple on top of this like bluish color, and it created this wonderful transition right here, right? Which makes it so much easier to blend and make these smooth transitions versus Artex, which you could probably get this with, but it takes a lot more elbow grease. And on top of that, these are much more opaque, which I like opaque. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is more akin to like if you wanted to do just like cell shading or like an anime style type of coloring versus this, which creates like a actual painting process and rendering process, which is why this, I feel like, came out so so nicely blended. It's because of the fact that these markers are opaque enough and have the ability to actually go ahead and do this job. So I really like the fact that I could do that with these markers, and I feel like I don't think any other marker does that at the moment. Maybe they do and I just don't know, because like I don't try, you know, every single art marker brand in the world because I'm not a billionaire. But I really like how this looks, and I think the Deli markers really have an advantage when it comes to that. Now, normally I would never do this, right? I usually don't blend acrylic markers together because they're opaque enough, and I think that if you're going to use acrylic markers and want to blend with them anyway, you might as well just use acrylic paint, especially because acrylic paint, at least you can build up, versus acrylic markers, they're kind of just strong right off the bat. So, from this logic right here, after looking at the piece that I was originally doing and layering and see how the colors would mix and combine together, I was like, okay, why don't we just try blending these markers together? And I'm so glad I ended up doing that, because I feel like the look of these markers are so incredible, like genuinely. It almost gives like a digital art look to it from how smoothly the colors kind of transition into each other, and how nicely they can come together and make a wonderfully painted piece. I honestly think after using these markers, they're gonna be ones that I'm gonna be using pretty much way more often, and have probably moved up in the like art food chain for me to where they're like one of the tools that I really want to use, and I think I'm gonna have as a favorite for a little while, because of the fact that they did something that I love, which is blending together, and that's something that I'm always striving to do with my art materials. I guess that's why I don't really lean towards my regular acrylic markers, because the blendability really isn't there. But with these, I'm definitely able to go ahead and do something like that, and I feel like that's going to change the game for me. After this, like, I'm totally converted onto lighter layered markers, and I really like the fact that I can go ahead and do something like this with a tool that is so available to everybody. So even though these markers have their ups and downs, regardless, I'm definitely thinking that these are going to be a new favorite marker of mine just because of the things that I can do with them. So yeah, thanks for watching, and remember, I love you. Bye!